Hello, Facebook. We are here with Midlothian, Illinois Voters Block, interviewing our police chief of Midlothian,
Delaney.
Daniel Delaney. We just have some very basic get to know you questions and a couple questions we fielded from the residents of Midlothian. We'll start off with how long have you been police chief?
Almost 4 years now.
And how did you become police chief?
I was deputy chief at the time. When Mayor LaRue came in, he replaced Chief Kaufman. I served as interim chief while they did the interview process, and I was ultimately selected.
And voted on by the village board, right?
Yes.
It's not just an appointment, and
No,
Gary doesn't. It's not.
Yeah, it's
Gary's
confirmed
not king of Midlothian. It all has to
Correct,
go by the
it's
voter
confirmed by
board.
the board.
So before you were chief, in total with your 4 years as chief, how long have you been in law enforcement?
18 years.
18 years. Have you always worked for Midlothian?
Yes.
How many officers work under you?
We have 29 full-time, 28 full-time, 29 including myself, and then we have one part-time officer.
Well, so mostly full time. Because
Yes.
a lot of municipalities like Crestwood, they do majority of part time.
Correct.
And I don't know why.
I wouldn't say a lot of municipalities, but yeah, there are some.
There are some that do
Right.
part time for multiple reasons, and
Right.
you know, a lot of residents don't understand why or why not, you know, give these guys full time jobs, you know,
Right.
because now they have to find another job to supplement their income. But anyway, how many employees of the police department are not officers? Or are they all? They're not all officers, correct?
Correct. We have 3 clerical staff. We have the animal control officer who also serves as the community service officer.
So we do have animal control here in Midlothian,
We do.
and it's not just through Cook County, or is
Correct.
a Cook County officer?
No,
Or is it a
she's
Midlothian
she's a
police
Midlothian
officer?
officer, but she does have a great relationship with the Cook County ones. And
Frank Pearson?
Yes.
Yes.
He served on our EMA as well.
Awesome. Okay, let's get to this. What do you find to be the most challenging part of being police chief? I know there's a lot of challenges you have, and
Definitely a lot of challenges.
a lot of things that you shake your head and roll your eyes at, and just probably drive you nuts. But if you had to
Right.
name one, what would be like the most?
The biggest thing is bridging gaps and finding ways to be transparent with the community, build the relationships with the community, and explain why we do what we do, why certain things need to be done the way they need to be done, and get that understanding and build those relationships so people start to understand where we're coming from a little bit more and humanize what we do.
Right, right. Because most people have their preconceived notions of what should be done, and
Right.
unfortunately, we may not agree with the law, but we are burdened by it, and that goes for everybody, even
Right.
officers. So, what do you find to be the most enjoyable part of being police chief?
Being the actual police chief, I think running the place that I always envisioned it being. We've had some great police chiefs here in the past. I think one of the things that I wanted to see was a little bit more community policing and being engaged with the public a little bit more, being a little bit more transparent about what we do, getting officer involvement so everybody has buy-in around here, and morale gets to be increased by doing that. And I think we've accomplished a lot of things that I wanted to see done so far.
And in a police force, I mean, morale is everything.
Morale is everything.
Absolutely.
It's what encourages guys to want to stay here. Turnover can be very expensive. Guys are a lot more proactive and productive when they are happy, so it translates to a lot of different things when you do have a police force that is happy to work here.
Absolutely. Does Midlothian have residency requirements for their officers, or what is the residency requirement to be a Midlothian police officer?
We no longer have any residency requirements. The guys are allowed to live wherever they want.
Anywhere. There's no radius or any kind of.
We had a radius, and during the last contract, they asked for an expansion of that. One of the things that we talked about when we decided to just release it all together is how the courts look at these restrictions now, and if it were ever go to arbitration, and if we wanted to fight it, they're looking at it as if you're gonna pull it, then they're not going to get into how far the boundaries could go because you've pulled all together. So my only thing with that is you can live as far as you want to live, but you better be to work on time, and they understand that. most of the guys still live relatively close. We still have individuals that live in town, so it has not been problematic so far.
Well, yeah, because I know a lot of critics will say that, if you don't live in the community you're policing, then you might not take as much pride, or you might not care as much about policing the neighborhoods, and
Right.
you know,
I actually think just the opposite nowadays. I think maybe back in different times, maybe different century or decades, where I think the perception of law enforcement right now, and I think it's a little bit more dangerous. Where police officers, when they live in the community that they serve, when they go to the store and they're worried about certain individuals who they may or may not have arrested, would know where their family lives. I think that might affect their wanting to be a little bit more proactive or productive. Whereas if they're going home to a location where maybe not everybody knows them, they feel like they can go be the police officer they would like to be. So,
and they can actually clock out.
correct. So I think that goes along that.
It's a good point. Have you ever, in your opinion, done anything or worked in a manner where it might be considered outside the box, like where not necessarily off the books, or not following the rules, but where another police chief from another municipality might say, "Hey, that was good thinking," or that was clever, or something. Have you ever done that?
I think this job,
Not just as chief, but in your whole law enforcement career. I mean, I know you're always thinking outside the box, but actually,
well, that's what I was gonna say. I think like one specific scenario. I'm not sure.
tell us a story.
I think this job in itself, there's a lot of situations that aren't just black and white. So when when the law doesn't specifically address that, or it falls in between the areas, or you're not sure what to do, what I do and what I always tell my guys to is to resort to what is fair. So those kind of decisions need to be made on calls every day. When you're going into people's lives, and sometimes it's not necessarily criminal, but you have to make life decisions for people, or correct the incident as it's taking place that day. We try to fall back onto what would be fair when the law doesn't specifically state you need to do this, and that happens a lot. So that's why when you say, "Can I think of one off the?" It happens so many times that I can't think of one huge one right off the top of my head.
Not a problem. What I know, I asked you what's a challenging part of this job, but what's something that really tests your patience?
I think the most frustrating thing for me right now is just the perception of law enforcement. We don't get into this job for a popularity contest, and we don't necessarily get upset if bad people don't like us. I mean, that's the nature of what we do. But it's truly upsetting when otherwise good people, or people that have never even met you, have preconceived ideas just because of an incident that they saw on the news, that they automatically assume that you're a certain way. So I think it's a tough time for law enforcement as a whole. We're still going to go out there and we're going to do our jobs regardless. But it's a little bit tougher of a pill to swallow right now, where, especially me as the leader, I have to go encourage my guys when we know that this is the perception, and they're taking a little bit of a beating, and there's some great guys that work here. We have to find ways to keep their head up and remind them that there's still a lot of people that love us.
Oh yeah.
That's why it's very important that we explain why what we do, why things occur the way they occur. If something isn't correct in the news about the way something went down, it's our job to make sure we get our voice out there to explain, no, this is what happened and this is why it happened, so we can correct some of those perceptions.
And I think with everything, people take those, again, the word preconceived notions, and just no matter how hard you try to explain it or get it through to them, they I don't want to call it a waste of time, but try to explain to people that this is not the way it is, just because this is the way you think it. Okay, that pretty much concludes the questions that we put together ourselves as a voters block here in Midlothian. Now, we took some questions from, two are from residents of Midlothian, one is from an outside resident that had a question for you. We'll start with the internal Midlothian. I had a person come to me with a concern that I'll try to keep it brief, but it might ring a bell. Somebody had their car stolen, and then it ended up over, in Robbins,
Mhm.
and Robbins had it towed to their yard.
Okay.
And for some reason, there was a lack of communication between Midlothian and Robbins police, where that car sat there for 2 weeks, and then, even though it was reported 5 minutes after it was stolen,
Mhm.
that there was a lack of communication. They want to know what line of communications database, or is it just phone calls, or I mean, how does Midlothian specifically communicate with neighboring communities,
Right.
as far as like keeping tabs on specifics, like a stolen car from Midlothian ends up in Robbins
Right.
and sits there for 2 weeks, and obviously the person who asked the question kind of put it on Robbins and understands that Robbins should have known that it was a stolen car.
Right.
But when you guys say, when you report a car stolen, that automatically goes across the board to other municipalities, correct?
Absolutely.
I mean, once a car is reported stolen,
Right.
so the fact that it sat there, I'm kind of answering the question for you as I did to them, but just to clarify, this was a resident of Midlothian.
Okay. So
I put it out there that anybody can ask you anything they want, and
Absolutely.
I got 2 questions,
Absolutely.
so that's one of them.
So I'm not familiar with this particular incident. That has not been brought to my attention yet. So I can speak more to generalities of how procedure should occur,
Mhm.
or what would have occurred there. But I can't say specifically what did occur in this particular situation because I'm not familiar with that. So if a car is stolen out of Midlothian, we will take a report.
Mhm.
We will enter it into a database called Leads, which is shared throughout the state of Illinois. So anytime anybody runs a name, registration, or anything like that, the information is going to pop up. Any type of alert, such as the car is stolen, which would have happened in this case.
Right.
So the agency that locates it ultimately would be responsible for making notification to the owner of the vehicle to say, hey, we have your vehicle, here's where the vehicle is located, here's what you would need to do to obtain the vehicle back. So the only communication that would have needed to occur to Midlothian would be for our officers to know that we can now remove this car from the Leads database to say it's no longer stolen, it's been recovered by a police agency, owner notified. Where the breakdown in communication occurred between law enforcement and the owner of the car for it to sit there that long, I would encourage that person to call myself and Chief Wells, and we can get to the bottom of it. And if somebody needs to be held accountable on that, or funds need to be reimbursed because of a lack of communication on law enforcement's part, I'm sure I would be willing to do that, and Chief Wells is a good guy. I'm sure he would be willing to correct that as well.
Somebody brought up, when you first became chief, there were some officers that were removed. I don't know if you want to comment on this or talk about it, but or how to properly word it. Basically, cops that weren't, or police officers that weren't fitting in with everybody else for whatever multiple reasons, that were removed from Midlothian.
Right.
They were curious as to how that happens, what the procedure is, if what draws, where's the line drawn when an officer can be removed from duty or let go without the village footing the bill, or some sort of wrongful termination happening, backlash to the police department.
So anytime there's a transgression, there has to be an investigation conducted. My deputy chief of police is responsible for internal investigations. I don't do them myself because I have to be the ultimate decision maker on that. So in order to maintain a level of fairness and transparency, you have somebody else investigate it, have the results of the investigation presented to me to make a fair and just decision. So it's ultimately up to me to decide what the level of that punishment is going to be. Now, while I'm fair, I take this job very seriously, and integrity is everything. So if the transgression is such that they don't deserve to wear this badge anymore, they will be held accountable. So we did have 4 incidents where officers did commit a transgression that they weren't worthy of wearing this badge anymore. Now, what I will say is, prior to, there were no other instances or anything in their background that it would have suggested anything prior to that date. It was very much a surprise to each of us. It hurt. It's not very easy to have a guy one day that you think, wow, the sky's the limit for this person and their career. the next day to make a bad decision. So they were bad decisions, but they were conscious decisions. One of the incidents, it was just something that happened well before the gentleman became a police officer here. That just came to light on us. It happened 20 years ago. But it was that serious that we couldn't ignore it, and we took action.
So it was something that happened 2 decades prior, but that because
Even
it
working here.
came to the light and
Yes.
and
Yes.
well.
So.
So if you feel that they don't deserve to wear the badge, then they are not going to wear the badge here, basically.
So there's a process. I have the ability to suspend an officer up to 5 days, or anything below that, including a written reprimand, an oral reprimand, or suspension up to 5 days. If I'm going to give somebody something more than 5 days, it does go to the Police and Fire Commission for a hearing. That goes up to 30 days of a suspension or termination. In each of these cases, the individuals realized probably how that would have turned out, and they resigned prior to it even needing to go to hearing.
That worked out pretty well then. If
I
they
think
knew.
it worked
and-
out well for all of us.
Yeah, that saved everybody a lot of time, and you know, obviously the taxpayers foot the bill on everything, so
Exactly.
time is money. One more thing before we get to the final question. The new police safety, what is it called again? Can you tell it? The safety building? Public safety, right?
The
It's a
new-
public
the new
safety
police-
center, public safety building,
Public safety facility, police station.
facility.
Yeah.
Okay, but I mean, it's gonna have a title, public safety, something along the lines.
It'll
right?
just be the Midlothian Police Station, but
Okay, we're calling it public
facility.
safety.
Yeah.
You're the trustee that works directly with the police department, Sandra Crawley.
Yes.
She said in one of the last village board meetings a couple weeks ago
Mhm.
that you were personally responsible for renegotiating cost of that structure, or the building process, or whatever the bottom line of that, the cost of that building is going to cost us.
Mhm.
You know, that you actually negotiated and helped, you know, I don't want to say cut corners, but you negotiated a cost to lower the cost to us, right?
Well, to an extent. So it's not the final cost of the building.
Mhm.
We're still in architectural design.
Okay.
What I negotiated was our contract and fees with the construction management company, and we reduced fees by, I'm going to say, roughly $200,000 through negotiation. We did the same thing with the architectural services, and then now we will, per design, the construction manager will go out to bid per se to get an idea of what our bottom line costs are going to be. So we're operating on a very strict budget, and based on the current anticipated design of the building, we'll get an idea of what the cost would be. So the construction manager in their contract
Mm-hmm.
will give you a guaranteed cost maximum of what the station is anticipated to cost, meaning if it exceeds what they said it would, they would eat the cost of anything over. That's why we put a guaranteed max inside the contract. Now, if they tell us in the design stage that we can't do it within your budget, then we'll just need to make modifications to size, scope, material, to get the design back within budget. So we've reiterated to all parties involved with this that we're on a very strict budget. We still want to see an amazing building because of the amount of money that we're paying for it, but we are very conscious of, we're on a strict budget. Taxpayer dollars will not increase one dime for this building being built, and we want to keep it that way, and that's why we're on that budget. Some bonds fell off that the municipality had floated before, and that's why we're just putting out new bonds for the same exact amount of money. Tax dollars will not increase one bit, and we're gonna just put those bonds back out.
Right. So the money they save, yeah. I was watching the meeting, and it was, I think they called it a refinance, or however the bonds work, as far
Right.
as the way that they work the finances. We're going to get this building for no
For
no
tax
additional
increase,
cost.
No tax increase.
And that's amazing.
That's
I think that's huge for the village.
Right.
I think what you did was huge as far as negotiating the maximum cost,
Right.
and just I know everybody's excited to see
Yeah, so-
it's breaking ground. Now, is there a final location set already, or are we still working on location as well? Because I know, like
We're
you said,
still
we're still in the
working on
design phase, but we're still
Yeah.
working on a location for that.
We have an idea where we would like it to go, but we're in talks with the owner of the property right now, trying to finalize a deal for that as well, and to see if they're even willing to sell. So
And we can't talk about where, right?
I don't want to say it yet,
Okay.
just because if they find out, right now we're using third-party service, so they don't realize it's a municipality, which would then say, oh, well, then we'll increase the cost of it because they have bigger pockets.
Government money. We
Yeah,
can
so-
we can charge more.
Exactly. So we'd like to remain a little bit anonymous on the fact that we're looking to build a government structure on their plot of land to, potentially increase costs of what we're paying for it. Because right now, we'll fall under budget in that category as well.
Awesome. The final question comes from somebody outside of Midlothian, and their concern is what they call the lack of diversity in the police force. They, according to them, I don't know. You said there's 29 officers,
Correct.
29, including yourself, and then one part-time. So let's call it 30.
Correct.
And in those 30 officers, according to them, I don't know all 30. I didn't take the time to look at, but there's not a single black police officer in Midlothian. Is that correct?
Currently, there is not one. No.
Okay. Their concern is that lack of diversity shows, especially like you brought up earlier, the political climate, the preconceived notions of police officers by what they see on TV and what they read about in social media and stuff like that. This person says that he personally knows within the last 5 to 10 years, two former police chiefs and one former police sergeant, all three of them black, all applied. They all have very clean records and very extensive resumes, and they were denied.
So I can't speak to that somebody specifically applied or was denied, because I don't know who you would have been speaking to, but so I'll even speak to our last list. We had one African American gentleman who was number one on our list. We were doing his background. It was looking very good for this gentleman to be hired. He was prior military, still active military, and it was looking very good. During the course of the hiring process, we didn't hear from him suddenly, and we tried to track him down for the course of roughly a month, to where I finally had to make the decision to move on. We finally ended up hearing through friends of his that he actually joined back into the military and just forego the job. He was the only African American gentleman on our list. So we just did our test for new hires again. We had one African American take the test. Unfortunately, that person did not even pass during the physical agility aspect of the test. So there is nothing going on to where we're not willing to hire somebody. We do look at, of course, obviously, the background is huge. We're going to hire good people, but I can't hire somebody if they're not on our list. You know what I mean? So, and I think that goes a lot to what the current climate of perception of police officers are. You know what I mean? If the news and people are telling a certain demographic every day that this group of people don't like you, I'm sure it's going to affect their ability to want to take that test and join the police family. You know what I mean? And that's only something that I believe would affect that, but it's affecting our enrollment altogether. Typically, we have 100 people, 100 plus people show up at every test. We had 29 people show up for our last test.
Can I ask, how often do you do the test?
So the list is good for 3 years, but if we happen to exhaust the entire list before that 3 years is up, then we'd be forced to make a new list. So the only other thing that we can do is, say we were down numerous officers, I have the ability to establish a lateral transfer list where we can hire certified police officers to come in from other municipalities, and maybe that's what your friend is speaking of. We did do that before. So the bad part is, oftentimes with lateral transfer lists, you're getting somebody else's problem. A lot of times when people are certified police officers and they're looking to go to another municipality, we have to find out why. So Midlothian is a smaller town. Salary wise, we're probably low middle of the road as far as competitiveness.
As far as what, statewide or countywide, or?
I'll say just in respect to this area, but
Okay. South Cook County.
Right. So typically and historically, we have been a training ground for that very reason. We can't compete with the Orland Park, Tinley Park, Naperville, up north type salaries. So we have to find, and that was one of the biggest things that I said I wanted to do when I took over, was reduce the amount of turnover that we have. So we have to get creative in certain ways of how do you make guys want to stay, and having them want to stay is getting them involved in things outside of their normal scope of duty, being specialized trainings, having them have buy-in and say so within the police department, things that you can't necessarily put money on, you know what I mean? So I think we've done a very good job of that, of every guy here has some type of specialty training that this is what he brings to the table to Midlothian, this is what he trains other officers on, this is what he likes to do outside of his just normal patrol duties. So having a climate here where the guys have buy-in, I think has increased morale, it's reduced turnover tremendously. But having said that, back to your original question, with the lateral transfer list, we're not going to attract people coming from Naperville to here or Orland Park to here. Typically where we've had much success in getting great officers were the ones coming from, say, like a Crestwood, part-time type agency, or somebody where we're actually paying higher than them. We've had problems where we've gone exhaustively through a lateral transfer list because it was police officers who were a problem somewhere else. So I don't know if that's what your friend is speaking to, and I don't know if maybe they were a little bit further down the line, because with a lateral transfer list, there is no scoring people with like a new person list where you took a physical agility test, you took a written test, you scored on that, you took an oral test, you had a score based on that. We did the lateral transfer list where we would start interviewing people for the position based on who turned in their application first. Okay? So we don't have any openings right now, and we haven't needed any additional personnel for probably a year and a half now. So the lateral transfer list still exists, so maybe these people are still sitting on a list. I don't know specifically who claims that they were passed and that they don't have anything in their background, but I can assure you,
I can't tell you. I mean, I was just the questions
Yes.
were asked to me. I wasn't given any details,
Right.
but they, according to them,
Right.
you know, they.
And I don't do the backgrounds myself. I have one of my investigators, and they're very extensive backgrounds.
Oh, I'm sure.
Very extensive. So
When you trust it.
we're also very strict on, we hire good people that we believe are good people that pass these, and I oftentimes, if somebody has transgressions from another police agency where they were in trouble there, we're oftentimes moving past that because we're not going to take on somebody else's problem. We're trying to have a very good police force here, and that is as much a benefit to the community as it is to us. So I don't care what race somebody is, I don't care about any of that. All I care about is, are they a good person, and what are they going to bring to the table here. We would love to increase our diversity here. We have several females now, we have a couple Hispanic officers. We'd love to see an African American apply and be hired on this police department, but unfortunately we don't have any that will be on our current list.
Times are changing. Right?
Yes, they are.
Final question. Somebody had mentioned, I don't know if they were serious, but I'll ask, is there any plan, or has Midlothian ever had bicycle officers?
We do, and we currently do.
We currently do.
Mhm.
And they patrol 5 days a week, 4 days a week?
No, so
I think it was asked that we used to, and they don't
Right.
see them anymore or something, and I kind of
Right.
left it off my list of questions, but now as we're concluding, I just want to
Right.
throw that out there and
So
hopefully answer their question.
we're a smaller department, and we're oftentimes at minimum staffing as it is. So it's a specialty assignment. So if we have extra staffing on certain days, and it's weather permitting as well. So this is going to occur probably, you know, maybe half of the year anyhow, is when we'll have the guys out there. Now, it's because it's a specialty as well. Individuals have to go through extensive training to become a certified bike officer anyway, just from a safety aspect of it. And then we've also had it where bike officers were out there on their own before, or we kind of wanted to get away from that, and now we want to put them as a team, just because if one of them were to even fall off their bike and hit their head or something and were unconscious, nobody's going to know that. And we actually did have that happen with one of our officers, and he was in the middle of 147th Street, and luckily a passerby stopped and helped him out and radioed it into us. So now not only is it one extra officer that day, now we need two, because we're going that route. So it definitely doesn't occur every day, but we do have bikes, we do have certified bike officers, and through community policing, that is one of the things that we do like to see, especially during the summer months, of having the bike officers out there.
And I'm sure the citizens are happy to see, you know, more personable, more reachable.
Right.
You know, and I know, like you said earlier in the interview, and I've talked to Sandy Crawley many times about, you know, her big thing is the engagement with the people.
Absolutely.
And that obviously, you know,
Yeah.
putting some officers on bikes and having them ride around,
Right.
you know, they're more apt to stop and talk to
Right.
the people and how are you, this and that.
The officers are mandated to do such as part of their normal patrol duties anyway, whether they're in the squad car or they're out on foot.
To engage with the citizens.
Yeah, so I do have a point system here. It's not a quota, it's a point system, and there's numerous, probably 18 to 20 different ways of attaining activity points. And one of the categories is community contacts, and they are to have minimum 2 community contacts per shift, where they do go into businesses. They have to make contact with employees of the business, ask them how everything's going, things of that nature, do premise checks on abandoned houses, people on vacation, anything like that. So we have implemented a lot of new programs and a lot of new procedures to increase the community policing around here.
Very good. Thank you very much. One last question for a few of my followers, and just to clarify and make sure, it may sound silly, you probably laugh, but you can't personally assign somebody to be an officer, give them a gun and a badge, and say, here's the keys to a squad car, go patrol the streets, correct?
Correct.
There's a whole process and procedure to do.
There's a very long process.
And that's state law, I'm sure, or some sort of
Yes.
maybe even.
I mean, so you have to have a certification.
Right.
So maybe as a part-time officer, to accomplish what you're saying might be a little bit easier, where somebody would have the ability to circumvent certain process. We're definitely not circumventing any process.
But you are, even Gary, you know, who appoints you, you know, you can't do that.
No.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Not a problem. Thank you for your time.
All right.